Every time we cover something on Conservative Home, I always have to stress the reason why we are covering it. Conservative Home is a massively influential blog to pretty much the non-conservative parliamentary party. Remember, Conservative Home was the headline sponsor at the last big conservative sponsor at the big conservative conference. So they are very, very influential. So and why we cover this is because you get people like, as we're going to cover today, people like John Redwood, various other sort of conservative MPs. You get a lot of think tanks. You get other sort of crazy sort of ideas put forward by conservative MPs and other sort of conservative think tanks, because they view this as very much a safe space to put out their ideas to their conservative audience. And yet they don't really get a pushback because, of course, they're putting out to a conservative audience. Now, we have said before, reading some of the comments on Conservative Home can be quite interesting because there are a lot that vastly disagree with sometimes, which, again, are quite funny. And we've mentioned them when there have been a couple of very interesting sort of developments. Necessarily, even below this, there are a couple of people that are arguing with John Redwood to say that actually, no, we should rejoin the EU, that him pushing as hard as the Brexit he has pushed for is sort of responsible for a lot of the mess that the UK finds itself in economically. And yet, it's hard to say whether those people are sort of, actual sort of conservatives, or maybe just people who sign up just to be, I don't know, trolling, whatever. Because, like I say, you can sign up to the Conservative Home and start commenting straight away. There's no sort of restriction on it or anything like that. So, again, who knows? We'll never sort of really, truly know that answer. But, like I say, today, we're going to go over John Redwood's crazy idea. And of course, these aren't new. These are not new. But these ideas that John Redwood is pushing for are the exact same ideas that Liz Truss wanted to push for, which ended up crashing the economy. And of course, it is the usual nonsense we hear from these libertarian conservatives all the time of, oh, if you just lower taxes, somehow growth. And we've heard this all the time, that, oh, lower taxes, growth. Well, if you talk to a lot of economists and when they sort of talk about this, it's always a bet. It's a massive gamble because you never really know whether you will get that growth. So that's the first point. And then there are those who go, well, if you do that, there is no guarantee that the growth that you get from these reduced taxes is going to be sustainable. Not only that, you've got to remember, these are tax cuts. If the government decides that it is going to cut taxes, that means it is going to have to borrow more. This was the big problem that Liz Truss faced, because she was going to say, I'm going to cut taxes, but I'm not going to increase borrowing. So where was the government going to get this money from? And as usual, they fall into the exact same sort of, trap. Are you going to borrow more money to sort of cover the cost of these tax cuts? Because again, there is a cost to tax cuts, even though, as bizarre as that means, that's basic economics. Like I say, that's what led Liz Truss into such a disastrous road. But as we've said before, these ideas that Truss pushed and wanted to do, they are not vastly popular in the Conservative Party. Like I say, this libertarian ideology is not that popular in sort of British conservatism, but it does exist. Like I say, it is worth pointing out that it does exist, but it has massive problems that people like John Redwood, if they were to ever actually be sort of, a prime minister and actually run on this idea and this platform, they would not win. It is one that they would not win on. It is one where they would find that they would lose. And ultimately, well, as you saw with Liz Truss, a PM, a Prime Minister Redwood would find himself in a very, very similar situation to what Liz Truss found herself in as Prime Minister, of, everyone going, yeah, maybe we don't want to invest in the UK, or, we're a bit worried about what's going on here. And that's why you saw a massive run on government gilts, which again caused a massive fluctuation in the pensions market, which pretty much almost took out and destroyed the UK pensions market. And again, if the Bank of England hadn't stepped in, who knows? Who knows what would have happened? So we're going to go over once more, my friends, over some crazy, crazy, nonsensical libertarian ideas which John Redwood thinks will win the next general election. So, as always, before we do that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, as always, there's the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club. And of course, remember today we are going over the Liz Truss question and answer session for the Pony Club members and Patreon members as well. And yeah, I'm not looking forward to it. I am not looking forward to it. So yes, sign up to those if you want to see me suffer. And of course, we've got also a nice little library building up of other additional content that you can sort of see and watch as well. So like I say, I'll be recording that after I've done today's videos. So. Ooh. Yeah. Anyway, let's crack on with this then. So, as always, this comes from sort of Conservative Home, as we said, with the title of John Redwood. The British public want homegrown growth, not treasury dogma. And of course, as usual, this has become the new buzzword that some of these Conservatives love to sort of dig to. Treasury dogma. Why are they not working? Oh, it's just treasury dogma. So, let's begin, shall we? So, as I listen to people on the doorstep, I read the views that come into my website. There is passion neither for Keir Starmer nor for Labour policies. Really? Why is Keir Starmer doing so well in the polls? That's a bit of a complete misalignment of why people and their voting intentions for Keir Starmer and Labour. If that's the case, why do they want Keir Starmer and Labour then? Will we get that answer? I don't think we will. Indeed, those voters who backed us in 2019 but say to the pollsters that they do not want to vote Tory often, want us to be more conservative, not less. So hang on. These people who voted for the Conservatives for the very first time, who do not like the Conservative Party in these red wall seats, Redwood thinks that in order to win them over, they need to be more conservative. But when we've seen traditionally these groups of people in the red wall do not vote Conservative because you're conservative. I think John Redwood here is clearly living in a very alternate reality, because that's not what again people who I hear and who I talk to, because I live in one of these red wall seats. It's not what they are saying, and I've been to the areas around here and listened to them and hear what they have to say. Again, I think Redwood here is definitely living in some sort of echo chamber here, clearly. So they are not clamoring for Labour's higher taxes. Again, Labour is sort of suggesting higher taxes, but I think it's more fair to say who and what those Labour higher taxes are on, Mr. Redwood. I think that would be more fair to say. They do not want intensified or accelerated bans on petrol and diesel cars, nor mandatory heat pumps. Those would massively help the environment. I mean, you can say sort of the ban on diesel and petrol cars, maybe there can be an argument made and around when this ban should and should not sort of come in. But again, it is part of trying to get, the electric cars manufacturing system in the UK sort of up and running and making electric cars a lot more cheaper and affordable, which your party is directly responsible for not trying to achieve and has actively fought against that. Also, again, heat pumps. That would people who have heat pumps, guess what? They get lower prices on their energy. It's very, very good for them. So why not have them? Especially if you were to maybe, I don't know, do a government scheme like, with the solar panels. Just an idea. But, again, that would help massively moving towards net zero. But of course, you've got to remember, John Redwood is massively against net zero. They do not like Labour and the Liberal Democrat councils. Yet, why do they consistently vote for these councils? Again, just an idea. Sorry, they don't like these Liberal Democrat or Liberal councils that make it more and more difficult for anyone to get to work by van or by car, or get to the shops and park easily. So, again, lots of different ways you could sort of really interpret that if they're saying that. Are you talking about the ULEZ scheme, which basically really only affects London, has had somewhat of a good effect in lowering emissions? And of course, when you lower those emissions, guess what? People have a better quality of life. They live longer. We know that these sort of emissions that do happen in sort of these very sort of congested cities can have a big knock-on effect to people's health. So that is something that we should absolutely be looking at. And if you want to sort of give people better chances of getting to work, then why is John Redwood not campaigning for a big investment into public transport, into road and rail and bus services? Like you say, we'll get onto this later. They are not asking for an attack on private schools. Again, like I say, probably John Redwood is probably constituency headquarters, making sure that he's only getting the best, shall we say. There is a massive argument for getting rid of private schools, and certainly getting rid of their tax cuts, because again, that money can then go into sort of state schools. And again, the better state schools that you have, the more we can sort of spread this out and make more and more better state schools. Because again, if you are sort of, say, as you say here, sort of you said here, driving more people to try and compete for places at better state schools, well then why not make sure that all state schools are at a good standard? I mean, it's your party that's been in charge for the past 10 decades, unless you want to say then that you've sort of failed really when it comes to education. But of course, he doesn't want to say that. They do not want large bureaucracy in the public sector. Again, I think people very much disagree in the polls when we've seen that. And they are not preoccupied by the culture wars that consume the political left. Well, again, it's not the left really sort of wanting to fight the culture wars. After all, your very own Lee Anderson, your deputy, who's in charge of the chief whip of the chart, in charge of the party, who is responsible for running the campaigns, has basically said that the Conservative Party is going to have to fight on a platform of culture wars. You can just see, as we've always said, how just split the Conservative Party has really become on so many of these issues. Okay, so they do dislike the highly regulated and in part nationalized energy, water, and railway industries, and want someone to sort them out to provide a better and cheaper service. So again, for Redwood, this would be, oh well, we just privatize it all. And the thing is, rail is sort of partly privatized anyway, to a point where we are at a situation now where we might as well just go, well, why not privatize the whole system? I mean, we've seen it when it comes to sort of polls about people wanting to sort of, nationalize services. Rail is always the highest one for people to go, because, we own pretty much the railways anyway. We own and are responsible for the maintenance and the signaling of these. The big thing that we do not own really is the rolling stock and the train sort of services. That is where the private companies come in. And even then, as we have seen, this has not provided a good way for people to do it. And to really do it, you really actually have to invest in the rail industry to be able to do it. But of course, have we seen Conservatives invest in the rail industry? Technically, yes, with HS2, but we'll get to that later because he's going to talk about HS2 specifically, and I want to save that part till then. So they want cleaner rivers and no water rationing. Wait, no water rationing? You mean like in the summer where we have to have hosepipe bans and things like that to make sure we don't run out of water? Who is John Redwood speaking to? Who is this microcosm of a voter that John Redwood is speaking to? Because I don't think this person that he's speaking to represents the vast majority of the British voting public. They want more reliable and affordable trains. Well, you're not going to get that on a fully privatized service. They want reliable electricity at sensible prices. Well, again, you're not going to get that with a fully privatized service, because again, National Grid, which is again sort of the energy infrastructure, the UK sort of the UK government sort of owns that. That's not a private company that does that. And again, they're not responsible for setting the energy prices. That is responsible by solely the energy company. National Grid basically just goes, okay, we've got the electricity. Now let's make sure that everyone is sort of, it's sort of, spread out enough to be able to sort of cover the whole grid, and that, there aren't blackouts or anything like that. But we'll get to that later. And they are more concerned about outcomes than how it is done. Again, you do want to be concerned with how it is done, because that can absolutely affect the outcome. Yet there is an eerie disengagement about all the main political parties. As the tax squeeze intensifies on working people, Conservatives have fallen in the polls. And it's not because of the tax squeeze, but again, your party is very much responsible for that tax squeeze. And it is not really a tax squeeze; it is because other things have risen, mainly inflation, which is really causing the squeeze. So it's not a tax squeeze; it's an inflation squeeze, if more than anything. But there is no enthusiastic rush to the parties of the left that want to make it worse. Again, these parties of the left, that's very disingenuous. No one on the left wants to make this situation worse. We want to make it better, and I've put out policies how we can actually make it better. But then again, some of these things are indeed quite left wing, which is basically sort of putting, a tax on the windfall tax on energy companies, so that money can go into sort of greener energy and solutions. I mean, here's the thing: if David Cameron had not adopted his onshore wind farm ban, or even the offshore wind farm ban, and actually built those wind farms, we probably would not be in this situation as bad as it is now. Yes, it would still be happening, but we would have a lot of green energy coming in from those wind farms. We wouldn't be reliable on sort of, traditional sort of energy means. But again, that's your party's fault, and something that I think you heavily voted for. Just something to bear in mind, John. So, people understand the cost. People understand that the COVID-19 lockdowns, the war in Ukraine, and the energy price spikes are external events that hit all advanced economies. And unlike the self-inflicted exchange rate driven recession of the 1990s or the banking crash of 2008, a lot of these are very much driven by problems. Yes, all these things have hit other economies, but they've bounced back a lot better than us. They've done a lot better than us. That's something you're not really saying, and I find that once again very disingenuous. And I would always say, whenever this has come up by any conservative, said, "Oh well, all these things are hitting other economies as well." Well, yes, they are, but they're still doing better than us. So, It means that the present government, unlike those of John Major or Gordon Brown, has an opportunity to win people back. Well, again, you're saying that those two things were pretty much responsible, or that happened under the Major and Brown governments. But what about what Truss did? Because that's your government responsibility. You know, you were responsible for that. You backed Liz Truss, which led to a lot of these problems that we are facing today. So absolutely, your party is responsible for that, and I think should be electorally punished for that. So the main thing to get right is the economy. The Prime Minister recognizes this, and this is his twin aims of trying to get inflation down and get growth up. But he seems to have accepted, and this is where we start to get the nonsense coming in. He seems to have accepted the wrong Treasury advice. Yeah, you've just accepted the wrong Treasury advice. You should be listening, really, to the people who Liz Truss listened to. That's who you should be listening to. So to get inflation down first, by by stopping growth, and then to try and warm the economy up again, to try and produce some growth to start to make people better off. That is bad economics and even worse politics. Well, what is Rishi Sunak actually doing? I noticed he's not actually talking to that, but doesn't surprise me. So there is not enough time to bring inflation right down, and with no growth or even a shallow recession, then to try and pick things up again in the ways that people would feel and appreciate. Well, like I say, the next budget this autumn is going to be very, very interesting. From what we can hear, there's going to be sort of a massive giveaway to try and sort of make people, should we say, give more money in people's pockets. But how they will sort of achieve this is well, well, very interesting. It's no wonder Rishi Sunak wants more math teachers. But so, fortunately, for growth and lower inflation are not enemies. The secret to both is to put more capacity in so more is made and grown at home. Okay, so how then do you do that? Because traditionally, when we have seen this, it has been very much governments investing in economies and very much driven by the exact thing that John Redwood would be dead against, which is sort of state sponsored and funded capitalism. And I don't think John Redwood wants to sort of go into that, but we'll see. So this creates more jobs and incomes and provides more supply to lower the price rises. This is why the Treasury are so wrong. We needed a lower business tax rate, not a 31% hike in corporation tax, to copy the Republic of Ireland. Now, this is where it gets interesting because we'll get into this. So before we leave this part, before we get into commenting on this. So to try and copy the Republic of Ireland, oh, pardon me, with their 12.5% rate, and as a result, they have more investment per head, higher GDP per head, and more business tax revenue per head than we do. So, okay, let's first get this over with. Yes, Ireland does have a lower corporate tax rate, but I'm sure, as people from Ireland will say, they are also have a lot more different taxes. So I believe they can actually recoup that tax in a different way. You've also got, because of that lower tax rate, because of those sort of initial rates, when he says, oh, yes, they've got sort of more business revenue. Well, that is because I believe of the reporting that's done. So there's a lot more, should we say, dodgy accounting, should we say, going on in Northern Ireland because of those sort of lower tax rates. It's not necessarily been a good thing for Ireland overall to have those lower tax rates. Not only that, but why are those businesses doing so well? Why are they sort of doing so well in that area compared to the UK? It's because for decades now, Ireland has invested into sort of training and making sure that its sort of workers have those skills and are equipped to be able to go into that economy that they are creating in Ireland. And that is not something that you can just turn on overnight by just going, lower taxes, bang. There will be a minor, probably economic bump because of it, but it ain't sustainable, nor will it be good for the long run. Because if you decide to sort of cut that down to that rate, well, how are you going to sort of compensate for that loss of tax? You've got to do it somewhere. So do you raise another tax elsewhere? Do you borrow more? What do you do? So we see this all the time, and I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a new argument that we see. And it's something I'd actually like to look more into um, with this on Ireland. So if there's anyone who knows, or there's any good articles about this written about this in Ireland, do send them my way, because I'd be very interested to look sort of more into this and sort of how this works, and probably in some ways how this actually harms Ireland by having potentially such a low corporate tax rate, but also how the Irish government sort of compensates that for maybe in other areas having such a low corporate tax rate. So once again, it's, as we've seen all the time, it's, oh look, lower tax rate, but they don't really tell sort of the full story, what's going on in the background, which again we've seen conservatives do many, many times before. Singapore is a classic example. Like I say, oh, let's be more like Singapore. Really, you want to nationalize 80% of our industries? Oh, no, 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 no. Not that Singapore, but you've just said you want to be like Singapore. Oh, but anyway, let's go carry on. So we need to drive hard for energy self-sufficiency and to cut our dependence on unreliable and very expensive imported energy. So, okay, if you want to do that, let's go tidal energy. Massive opportunity really to invest in tidal energy. Offshore wind, massive. Onshore wind, massive. Geothermal pumps in and around sort of the coast, which would help certainly all the coastal areas, absolutely, massively. But again, it's something the government should be doing, should be investing in. Are they doing it? No, because they are completely against anything that might help net zero in any way, shape, or form. They are just strictly not interested in it. So that's not going to be. So John Redwood's source is pretty much, well, oh, we have to either go back to coal or invest in nuclear, which I think he's going to bring up in a bit. So the source of very much of last year's inflation that requires an end to price controls, subsidies, and windfall taxes. So again, energy would just go woo if you did that. I'm pretty sure that would be insane to do that. That would be insane to do that. So if we added sustainability to our gas and oil output to replace import, we could get a big boost to tax revenue without windfall taxes, which are a major drag on investments. So essentially, all you want to do is, rather than invest in sort of new green sort of technologies are also very much proven to work, as we've seen in other countries, Portugal being a prime example of where green and sort of investment in the green technology has massively helped their economy, but also massively reduced their energy prices. And you're seeing other countries go and invest in green technologies. But instead, oh no, we need to be more sustainable with our gas and oil. Yeah, again, this guy is very, very much left in the past. So, if we got on with producing these small modular nuclear plants and developing ways of storing renewable energy to smooth out its delivery, again, we would boost growth and in due course provide some downward pressure on prices. So, okay, invest in sort of the small sort of nuclear reactors. Okay, I'm fine with that. I've said before, if we really want to go sort of fully green, then we need a stopgap in between getting to the green, sort of renewable energy future. That stopgap has to be nuclear. So I am fine if he actually wants to invest in that. But what have we seen? We've not seen the government invest in that. And if you want to sort of invest in sort of storing this, which basically means building really big battery sort of storage facilities for all this power, then why aren't you investing in factories to build these facilities, to build these batteries, or even into building these types of facilities? You are not doing that. And you're the ones in government. So let's continue. So we also need to be far more supportive of the self-employed and small businesses. Lockdowns and the new IR35 tax agreements have seen the self-employed fall. Let's not also forget why a lot of self-employment did fall. It was because of the pandemic. A lot of people with small businesses were put out of business, not because of sort of these new tax agreements, but because of the pandemic. Nothing to do with tax at all. So we need to expand self-employment again and return the tax system to the rules of 2017 when self-employment was growing well. So essentially just undo the new tax agreement system. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not 100% sure that would be the best way to sort of go about it, but who knows? But to be honest, if Redwood's saying it, I don't think that's probably the best way to go about it. Other people who are sort of more experts in tax will ultimately, I think, have different sort of opinions on that. So we need to raise the VAT threshold for small businesses from 85,000 to 250,000 too. This would give an immediate boost to outputs across many sectors where entrepreneurs limit their turnover to avoid the need to register. Again, I do not think that if you did that, that would boost the output. Because you're basically saying, oh, if we boost output, these companies would make more. And we're not talking about more money initially here. We're talking about more products because they've got to make more products. But also, who are they going to sell to? Remember, we are seeing a lot of businesses lose massive portions of their chunks of businesses because they cannot export to the EU anymore and have basically had to give up. So raising the threshold for VAT, I don't see how that's going to help work and help these businesses. I've never heard someone complain about registering for VAT. I've heard people complain about, the price of VAT, but I don't think people registering for VAT puts them off from growing their business. So, and this gets fun. We cannot keep adding we cannot keep on adding any additional people to our population without providing more basic services like water. People do not want to be lectured on using less and told that there is a hosepipe ban as soon as it gets warm or dry for a few weeks. Well, if that is the case, then yes, you have to have a ban on hose pipes and stuff like that. I think that should be obvious. Now, if you want to, again, invest in water so that we build more reservoirs, well, okay, why is your government not doing that? Because it's your government that should be doing this. You're responsible. And also, private companies as well. Why are private companies not building new reservoirs? I thought it was meant to be the private companies and the private enterprise is the solution to everything. So, industry should also be required to put more in clean water capacity. The government is seeking an investment explosion to try and build the infrastructure needed to avoid sewage charges into the river. So the pricing formula and tax regime has to make this feasible at a lively pace. Again, these rivers and the sort of the sewage discharge, I think that could become a massive issue at the next general election. Remember, it was the Tories very specifically that voted down such laws, and of course leaving sort of the EU, the rules and regulations, and very much not funding the department to oversee these, to regulate these things, has been very, very much on them. This isn't a this is a problem that the government could solve if it were to fund these departments and actually punish these water companies efficiently so that they would not do it, as we saw when we were in the EU with those rules and regulations. There is a massive correlation between these sort of uh, these issues sort of starting to sort of when we left the EU. So anyway, we continue. So while the railways are busy running near empty trains on so much of the network at various times of the day, when it is not on strike, investment is grossly inflated and distorted and distorted HS2. The hugely expensive, much delayed, and which will not bring us any revenue or benefit for most of this decade. Again, HS2 is all about future proofing the rail network, and it is a massive boon to the rail network because, as we've said before in the talk we had with Gareth Dennis put it very, very simply and easily, if you may remember. He said the big thing with HS2 is people are selling it on speed. It is not about speed, it is about increasing capacity. You take the fast trains, you put them on the HS2 line, this then frees up capacity so you can have more trains running at having more local services, more sort of interregional services. That's why you have HS2. And HS2 would have a big benefit for us. Maybe not now, as you said, in the next decade, but after, it would be a massive boost to our economy. We need HS2 because it would be a big boost to our economy. Infrastructure like that is what we need to be building, but we're not, because you see someone make this silly argument of, oh, we don't need to expand the railways because they're already running at empty capacity. Again, not even explaining why those trains would be running at empty capacity. A lot of people, again, still working from home. Second of all, prices, on the trains. And thirdly, even though we are sort of do have a big sort of passenger sort of capacity, is nowhere near big to compared to the cargo that runs on the trains and on the rails, which is again something HS2 would help sort out, because again that would help to increase passenger capacity. And he really doesn't understand anything when it comes to sort of talking about HS2, but there you go. So ministers need to refocus and extend the timetable for this investment to make room for more worthwhile projects to boost capacities on bus routes now, and to provide an alternative to offer to the modern commuter, which may only wish to go to the office 2 or 3 days a week. So why then is your party and people in your party like Jacob Rees-Mogg so desperate to drive people back into the office? And especially like drive civil servants back into their office. And you go, busy routes. Well, that means more public transport. Are you going to invest in better public transport? Because people would love to take public transport if it was, again, effective, ran on time. And pretty much most bus services now do run on time. But are you going to see the government invest in commuter transport? I don't think so, because again, he's only talking about, busy routes. Basically, people use cars. Again, not even thinking about, of course, the future. So, digital signaling with onboard train systems to match would allow a safer, closer running to other trains on existing tracks, could boost capacity at a fraction of the cost of a new line. I'm not 100% sure of that. That's a question definitely to put to Gareth Dennis. So I'm sure someone will probably either send him this or whatever, ask him this question. I'd like to see that. what would happen, because I'm not sort of 100% convinced that this whole digital signaling is necessarily going to be that effective, as certainly as he claims. But like I say, we'll see what's an expert like Gareth Dennis would have to say on that. So on farming, we need to switch the system of farming subsidies away from wilding to supporting more production of eggs, apples, tomatoes, and meat. You mean, what about what about all those subsidies they got from the EU? Just those, what were those, a lot of subsidies really sort of about and meant? I don't really hear you sort of arguing for that. People would like more local food with fewer food miles. And we lost a lot of market share during our years in a common agricultural policy and need to catch up. Again, you can't grow everything in the UK, no matter how much people like John Redwood would love to sort of say, oh, we could grow everything. Well, here's the thing, you can't really grow salad in a lot of parts of the UK, and especially year round. You need to have good supply routes and closer supply routes than anywhere else. Like I say, much of our salad comes from South France or in places like Spain, where it is able to be grown all year round. But of course, again, doesn't really seem to sort of be wanting to sort of do that. So the public would warm to a government that went for growth this way. Well, certainly didn't warm to Liz Truss when she went for growth that way, and showed that Britain can now make such a growth of more of what we need. Our EU years were dogged by a huge balance in trade deficits as we lost market share in everything from chemicals to fruit to steel and energy. And again, that wasn't dogged by the deficit in that. That was because you had governments not investing in these things. I've said this all the time. One of the big things the government could do, if they really, really wanted to sort of save the steel industry, invest in carbon neutral steel. The entire sort of development to sort of do it would take about 25 years if they fund it properly, which again, it's this government, so I very much doubt they would do. But if they did, Britain could have like the world's first carbon neutral steel production. And we'll be massively ahead of any other country. It would secure hundreds of thousands of jobs, even create more jobs in these industries, in these sectors, even in these left behind places, which again, apparently John Redwood cares so much about. Will they do that? Absolutely not, because of course this is feeding us net zero, and of course, as we've seen, John Redwood explicitly against anything green or anything like that. So he's not going to do it. So trying to reverse this would be good for jobs, help lower inflation, and generate more tax revenue. Well, you're not doing things to help get those things in place. So how is it going to generate more tax revenue when you're not doing the things you need to be able to sort of build that? John Redwood is essentially trying to build a house downwards by trying to, put roof tiles on and then being perplexed when they drop to the floor and shatter. So it also does need lower taxes, of course, as we've seen, less lecturing consumers, and more working with businesses to deliver the capacity we need. It needs revision to regulations, oh, what a surprise, such as the emissions trading scheme and carbon tax, which penalizes domestic producers and favors imports. It also sort of discourages imports as well. There's a lot of stuff about carbon tax which does that as well, but I'm sure Redwood is massively in favor of that. And again, there is lots of stuff that we could do. If you don't want to sort of encourage imports, you could maybe raise tariffs on certain things to sort of encourage domestic imports. That's a way to encourage domestic imports. But of course, that's not what Redwood wants. Redwood would rather want a free market fundamentalist economy. He would rather have 0% tariffs, I'm pretty sure, in the long run. And again, as we've said before, that would ultimately massively negatively affect our sort of domestic sort of manufacturers here and food manufacturers as well. So, in the Second World War, the country was told to dig for victory, putting more land to work to grow food than we need. And then we need to make our own ships, tanks, and planes to obviously feed the war machine. It all worked very well, and the great feats were achieved. Well, here's the thing, John, we're not at war. Also, a lot of those things and the way that those factories were done were very, very socialist. Very socialist. Those industries at the time, those new factories, those new chemical plants were government owned. Again, I don't think Redwood would seriously actually want to do that. They talk a good game, but then you sort of highlight the fact that again, those shipyards, those tank factories, and those plane factories were government owned. Oh no, we can't do that. So today we need to make more, more of the cars, household goods, and the food that we want for a decent life. That will make the country more prosperous and shift the opinion polls. Again, to be able to be able to do that, Redwood would have to do a ton of things, mainly sort of investing in the UK and doing a lot of the state capitalism and nationalization. His party and even him himself spoken out against here in this. I mean, the railways is a classic example. We own, when you think about it, already a lot of the rail network is publicly owned. It's just mainly sort of the rail stock, the rolling stock that we really don't own and sort of how that works. And that's really the next step. I mean, we are thinking and talking about now any of these sort of the new contracts of these failing companies, bringing them back into sort of public ownership. So we're already practically there when it comes to sort of nationalization of the rail. Um, there's only sort of very sort of few steps, but even then, if you do nationalize the rail, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem of bringing down sort of ticket pricing. But yeah, like I say, obviously, big problems sort of these, and of course, John Redwoods is providing ultimately very, very simplistic ideas of, oh, well, if we lower tax, then somehow we get growth. But again, it's the typical ideologue arguments that we hear all the time. All the time. It is lower taxes, somehow you get growth. Get rid of regulations, somehow you get growth. Or what's the consequences of if you lower those taxes or you lower those regulations? What are then the consequences? Like I say, you've only got to look at the whole furore about the sewage discharge into our coast, into our rivers. So, like I say, if Redwood thinks that he can, and he and his rest of his party can get away with lowering regulations on a whole other area as well, certainly the sewage outbreak certainly would be a very key indicator. The meat crisis, which is still rumbling on, hasn't really made headlines yet, but ultimately I think it will. So, yeah, these are John Redwood's, once again, very nonsensical plans because, okay, you lower taxes to get growth, but where's the part in the middle? And what are you doing in the part in the middle? He talks about, oh yes, the government should do this, and this. He's in the government. He should be saying how. There's very little actual sort of policy proposal solutions here that he said. He just said, oh, if we do this, we'll get growth. This is the exact type of stuff that Liz Truss was going around saying when she was running to be PM. And then when she was PM, she went and did these things. And then, well, we all saw what happened to the economy. And like I say, we are still living very much with those effects of that particular sort of premiership. So, as always, like I say, it's been a long one today. But as always, thank you very much for watching. As always, thank you very much. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time. Of course, below links to the Patreon page, the Pony Club, Patreon, all down below. Thank you very much to all the people who do help support the channel. Like I say, please do remember to click on the like and share button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.